then I'm going to share my screen. Okay, here we go. All right, people at home, you're seeing the PowerPoint now, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, and is it pretty big on your screen, or are you seeing what I have on my literal screen, which is kind of small?
I can see it good.
You can see it good? Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so what we did last week, just as a review, we were only here 2 days last week, so we didn't do much. But what we did do is we made our 3 clay fortune cookies, which people who are here, you are now slaking to make your slip. We're not technically going to need slip today, or we're just getting it out of the way, getting it taken care of. Then you're going to put the lid on at the end of the hour. You're going to shake it up. You're going to keep it in your locker for when we do eventually need slip. People at home, that's one of your tasks that you're going to be doing today. We reviewed prior knowledge from Ceramics A. We talked about stoneware. We talked about what temperature it fired to. We talked about scoring, slipping, and melding. We talked about the stages your clay goes through. And that's going to be important today because you're going to have to evaluate what stage your tiles are in. And people who are here, I already told you to check your tiles, and a lot of you, probably your tiles were too dry. Mine were, and it's because I used a wooden tray. I should have foresaw that problem. But because we had a weekend and there was a lot of time where those clay tiles were sitting on that wooden tray, the wood takes moisture out of the clay and the tiles just dry too much. So if you had a plastic tray, your tiles were probably okay. But if you had a wood tray like me, your tiles are probably a little bit too dry because we're going to be stamping into those tiles today. So people at home, you may have the same problem. Your tiles might be a little bit dry today. So I'll tell you what you're going to do to rehydrate them. So you made at least 3 tiles last week, and then you made 3 double-sided popsicle stick tools for stamping designs onto your tiles, which you're going to be doing today. I'll talk more about that in a little bit. Today, we're going to slate the fortune cookies. You're going to check your tiles to see which stage they're in, and then we're going to start stamping designs onto the tiles in a way that looks good, that conforms to that shape that you've made. So some things to know before we begin. There's a good chance your tiles may be too dry. People at home, if your tiles are too dry, get a wet paper towel, sandwich your tiles between that wet paper towel, and then just let them sit in a bag for about 20 minutes. That should be enough to rehydrate them, because little things rehydrate really pretty quickly. So we should be able to rehydrate them, no problem. The tools you're going to need today are your popsicle sticks, your tiles, obviously, a small sponge, and then people who are here, you're going to get a little tiny bit of a straw. People at home, you have that little tiny bit of straw in your Ziploc bag. So you're going to look for that today. You're going to need it. There's a reason there's a picture of cheese up there. I realize that's not explained. Leather hard clay should feel like cheddar cheese. You know, if you've ever poked a block of cheddar cheese, like it's firm, but yet yielding. Like if you pushed hard enough on that block of cheese, it would squish under your fingertips. That's kind of the texture that we're looking for. That's what leather hard is. If you push the clay and it gushes out like soft Play-Doh, that's plastic. And then we need to hair dry it a little bit to get it more firm and more leather hard. If you push it and it snaps in half, that's a sign that it's bone dry and you need to start over again, which isn't a big deal on a project like this because it's really quick to make new tiles. Just a reminder, if you need to dry out your tiles, if they're too sticky wet, there's a hair dryer station over there, and there's another hair dryer station in the back by the sink. So you can use either of those stations to dry out your tiles if they're too wet. So the first thing, which people who are here are doing right now, people at home, you're going to be doing this eventually. You're going to take the plastic container that I've given you in your swag bag, put your fortune cookies in it, fill it with just enough warm water so that the fortune cookies are half covered, and then just watch, because the clay will get ripped apart by that water. It'll slake down one platelet at a time. People who are here right now, maybe take a peek inside your container and see if you see your fortune cookie starting to melt and slake down into the warm water. That's how we're going to make slip. It's the quickest way to make really good quality slip. So after about 30 minutes, we're going to put the lid on tight, and then we're going to shake it up and then make our good slip that we'll use for the whole trimester that way. So like I said, you're not going to use the slip today. You're just making it today. All right, so the first, actually, well, that's not the first thing. Second thing we're gonna do today after we've made our slip, we're gonna check our tiles. Are they plastic? Are they leather hard? Are they bone dry? If they're plastic, use a hair dryer for about 30 seconds at a time and then test it and then hair dry it again if you need to. If the tiles are leather hard, you're gonna smooth the edges. So leather hard is the ideal stage we're looking for. We're gonna smooth the edges, make everything look really neat. Then, like the tiles you see on the screen, we're gonna take that straw and we're gonna poke a hole in each tile so that this can actually hang up and be part of your wind chime project. We're actually, if you choose to glaze these, we're gonna glaze both sides and we're gonna hang them in the kiln too, so that you can glaze both sides of your wind chime and have it look good from both sides as it hangs. If the tiles are bone dry, still at that point, after you sandwich them between the wet paper towel, use a wet sponge to hydrate the clay until it is leather hard. And again, because it's such a small shape, it'll rehydrate fairly quickly, much more quickly than if it was a big project. Now, here's the point of what we're all working for today. We are going to be using the popsicle stick tools that you made on Friday or that you might be making today. And we're going to be using those to add texture, value, repetition, and movement into your tiles. So these are things we talked about way, way long ago in ceramics. So let's see what you remember. Can somebody tell me what is texture? People at home, you can unmute yourselves and tell me too if you know. But what is texture? This is one of the ones that's like kind of know what the word means, even if you don't remember the art definition of it. So just off the top of your head, what do you know about texture? It's a pattern that you can feel. Right, exactly. So we're going to be adding texture to our tiles, and you can literally run your fingers over it and feel that texture. That's how the surface is going to become more interesting than if it was just flat and smooth. Value. Value is a little bit more of a challenging one. Does anyone remember what value is in the world of art? Specifically ceramics. Typically, actually, we refer to value in the plural sense, values. So values are light areas, medium tone areas, and dark areas. So if you look at these tiles up here, see how there are some areas that appear really light and bright and white, and some areas that are seen kind of like a medium gray color, and some areas that seem really dark gray because of the shadows that are down inside those areas. So by creating texture, we create value. By adding stamping and pressing into the clay, we get light areas, medium areas, and dark areas, which again make the surface so much more interesting and dynamic. And when you glaze those textures, I feel super bummed out because I can't pass this around. But here's an example of what your texture might look like that you start adding to your clay today. See how the glaze really settles into the stamped areas and it really accentuates those areas. Here's another one. So see how the glaze goes down inside those textures really beautifully and it accentuates those darker values. It makes the darker areas get even darker and stand out even more. Sorry, people who are at home. Here's a plate for you to look at. I don't know how well you can see that, but the areas that have been stamped, the glaze accumulates in those little darker areas and it makes it stand out. So that's what we're going for. Texture, we're going for value. And then dealing with principles of design, we're going for repetition. Somebody tell me, what is repetition? This is another one that you kind of don't have to know the art definition to know really what it is. Yeah. Yep, exactly. Yeah. So you're doing something multiple times. So the point that I'm trying to make there is you're not just going to take one of your tools, stamp it once, and you're done. Okay, that is not repetition. So we're doing this repeatedly, and that's where these designs get really powerful and really impactful when you repeat them again and again and again to build up this great texture. The final thing is movement. We're going for movement in our designs. And when we talk about movement, we're not talking about like our tiles are not literally going to move. We're talking about visual movement. Where does your eye go? When you plot out that path, when you're stamping your textures on there, what kind of movement are you going to have? Because I have Minnesota as my tile, this is a really complex shape. So as I'm trying to figure out where my designs are gonna go, like I kind of have to think about what kind of movement am I gonna have here. It might look kind of weird if I do like diagonal stripes across here, but what could be kind of cool is if I start my texture from right where the Twin Cities would be, where we live, and then radiate my texture out from that spot. So that would make sense. That would kind of create a movement where your eye starts right here in the Twin Cities and then moves out from that point. So no matter what shape you chose, you're going to want to make that design kind of follow that form and follow that movement and create that dynamic composition. Here's a good example of a person. They had a circular shape, a circular format. They started with a design in the center, and then they just did a radial design that kind of grew out from that center spot. Well, they can see this because it's dark. By contrast, this kid did a circle, and they did stripes across it. Their designs went in lines across it. Not a bad choice, not a terrible choice, but it doesn't really create the nice movement or conform to the shape as well as the circular design does. So I want you to think about the shape tile that you chose and then do a design that definitely conforms and creates a nice movement that goes with that shape. So we're gonna watch a couple of videos now of different artists doing this literal stamping into the clay, the same as you're about to be doing. This work you see right here is the work of an Irish artist named Mary Stone. So we're going to watch two videos by her. They're really short. And then the first video is by a different guy. And he is using popsicle sticks, the same as what you created. So let's watch him first. I don't remember his name, sorry. There's just music. So he's just sanded his popsicle stick into a point, and he's just repeating that pattern. And you can see it's the most simple tool he could have possibly made. But when you repeat it, it's really pretty cool looking. And you could take that same shape, and if you started it in the center like a circle and radiated it out from the circle, it would have an even different look to it. Now he's repeating the shapes, and the more he stamps, the more complex the design becomes. So that's just an easy little add-on. If you have a pointed end on one of your popsicle sticks, cut a little indent into that pointed end. You can see with just a simple change in shape, you get quite a different kind of indent when you press it into the clay. This isn't really stamping. This is a different texture technique. This, I think, is really clever. He's making what look like little openings, little knots in the wood, because no piece of wood is going to have ultimate perfection. And then he's also using the pen tip to create nails. So you're going to be able to use other tools other than just the popsicle sticks that you created. You can use found objects like pencils, pens, toothpicks, paper clips. But the majority of your design, like over 50%, needs to come from the tools you made. So this is probably the best example of what you might actually do. So he's going to combine different tools. So notice how he's using the pen at different angles to get a different sort of look. You're going to be stamping each one of your tiles, both sides of each tile. And feel free to experiment, try different things on different tiles. They don't all have to match. What's going to help tie them together is whatever tools you use, I want you to use the same tools on each tile. You could do different patterns, but just use the same tools. That's what's going to help keep them unified. Isn't that cool? The more marks you make, the more complex the shape becomes. Exactly. The more things are happening on that surface. All right. So the rest of his techniques, I feel like, are not relevant to what we're doing. So I'm going to skip to Mary Stone. Her videos are all time lapse, and they're so hypnotic and satisfying to watch. She has hundreds of these YouTube videos of her making her work in time lapse. We're just going to watch 2. So this is a circular tile where she does a little bit of drawing first to lay out an area that couldn't really be stamped. And then she's going to stamp around it. So if you want to do some drawing on your tiles and then utilize stamping on the rest of it, that's fine. So that was a toothpick. This is the end of a pencil. Now to get smaller circles, she's using a toothpick again. So you can see her design is asymmetrical. It's not the same on both sides, and that's totally fine. You can choose to do a design that's symmetrical or asymmetrical. Okay, so there's one example of her work, and now we'll look at another example. So you can see with all the repetitive marks, it does take a lot of patience. You're going to have to be patient with yourself. Go slow. Our goal is to try and get the front and back of as many of your tiles stamped today as possible. Whatever you don't finish today, you're going to have to finish tomorrow. But the goal is to get the front and the back of all the tiles. Some of you did 3, which was what the minimum was that I asked. That should be pretty manageable if you only made 3 tiles. Some of you made more than 3, in which case it would be totally natural if you finish doing your designs tomorrow. So Mary Stone uses actual, real, like high quality porcelain, and she makes her pieces thin enough so that if you look through the porcelain towards a window, you can actually see light coming through the porcelain because it's so translucent. It allows light to shine through. So these are lanterns that she's making. And at the end, you're going to get to see what it looks like when you put a light bulb inside these lanterns. The light actually shines through the porcelain where it's stamped thinner. So the kind of porcelain we are, well, we're using stoneware, which is not translucent. So it would not have that exact same effect, unfortunately. Actual real porcelain is really expensive, so so we don't use it. Okay, so when you have made your tiles and they're leather hard, we've confirmed that they're leather hard by either drying them out or by rehydrating them. Your next step is to test out your popsicle sticks that you made. What kind of designs do they make? What do they look like when they're in a line? What do they look like when you put them in a circle? You're going to grab a scrap piece of stoneware, just from the bin over there. Just flatten it out by your hand. You don't need to do anything special with it because it's going to become your test tile. So you're going to test out all your different little designs, see how they look. And then when you see what kind of designs you like the best, you don't have to use every design that you made, every tool, every side that you made. Maybe you only have 2 or 3 of the edges that you really like the look of. You could just use those 2 or 3. You don't have to use all 6 designs that you made on both sides of each popsicle stick. So once you played around with it a little bit and you like the design that you came up with, then on each of your tiles, you're going to come up with and stamp in some designs that have texture, that are going to create values, lightness and darkness. There's going to be repetition because you're going to use the same design repeatedly. There's going to be movement that leads our eye around that shape and that conform to the contours of the shape that you made. Please be careful. Please be patient with yourself. Don't rush. You shouldn't be done with this in 10 minutes. This should be something that is a slow and patient process. You can also use other found objects like pencils, pens, toothpicks, paper clips. Some people at home, maybe you have rubber stamps and you want to use some rubber stamps. You can use the end of a nail or a screwdriver to make some different textures. You can use kind of almost anything that you want. But as I said before, your popsicle sticks need to be at least 50% of the design. Then make sure that you are stamping both sides of your tiles. So it shouldn't just be one side because these are going to hang or they're meant to hang. Maybe you aren't going to fire them. Maybe you're not going to keep yours. But you still need to make it as though you were going to keep your tiles. And they do need to have textures on both sides. So if this were to hang in the breeze and turn around, we would see something cool from both sides. So I realize I didn't write this up on the screen, but I will say it right now. So these are my rehydrated tiles. So on this step, when you get to this third step, the first thing you need to do before you start adding a design to your tiles is take that little bit of straw that I gave you, put your finger behind it to provide some support there, and then just slowly poke that straw through the top of your tile. That's how we're going to make the holes, okay? And that's going to be big enough where after it shrinks, when it fires, we'll still be able to fit a string through there. So that'll be done first, then you'll do all your designs. And then finally, final step is to put your slip container and all the tiles that you stamped today in front of you in one picture, one composition, snap picture, upload it to Schoology by 3 p.m. for 20 points. So it's everything you did today in one picture. I am not going to demo anything today because I think the videos did a pretty good job kind of showing what you're going to be doing for your designs. People who are here in person, actually people who are online, stay with me for just another minute more and I'll come back to you. People who are here in person, I have some additional found object things that you can utilize for stamping. You know how Mary Stone had like one big design and then she did a bunch of little designs around it? I have some things here that could maybe be a big design, and then you use your tools to stamp something around it. So if you want to use these, great. You need to wash it really well. when you're done, and then put it back so someone else could use it. Little straws are up here, toothpicks are up here if you want to use those. X-Acto knives are up here, but these are only for using on the popsicle sticks. Do not use the X-Acto knife on clay, please. And then the other thing, cookie cutters, popsicle sticks, and paper, if you need that stuff, that's over here. People who were not here on Friday, if you want to touch base, if you know someone in here who was here on Friday, kind of ask them what they missed about making the tiles, using the slab roller, making the tools, feel free to do so. I'm going to touch base with the kids who are online, and then I'll come back to you in about a minute. If you want to wait for me and have me explain what you missed, I'd be happy to do that too, okay? Go ahead, get to work. People who are online, I'm going to come back to you now. I'm going to stop sharing, stop recording.